If you clicked on this video and you've made it this far in fantasy football, now is not the time to mess things up. And there are a whole bunch of traps on the waiver wire that people tell you to go pick up. But lucky for you, you found this video because I'll be giving you guys a full list of players we should be picking up that can actually win weeks by themselves, that are just hiding under our noses on the waiver wire going into week 2 of the fantasy football playoffs. So let's get into it. Make sure to hit that like button if you are feeling generous. And I do have a list of defenses we can go ahead and pick up off the waiver wire that are very, very good. I don't know how they're still not rostered, but I hate to waste people's time. We've had a whole bunch of injuries this week, and this is making Josh Palmer one of the best waiver wire pickups, probably a week winner. And I'll make this quick because if you guys have been around this page for long enough, I've talked about him for the past 3 weeks, but now is probably the last time you can get it. He came out last week and had 4 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like this was an amazing game because if we look at it, it really wasn't compared to the numbers. The Chargers were getting blown out by the Raiders. They let a touchdown slip, but he still is the wide receiver 1. There was no Keenan Allen. Will he be back this week in week 16? We can probably assume that he will. Either way though, even if he is, he's still a viable wide receiver 2 that we can put at a flex spot without Justin Herbert. He put up this stat line in a game that was pretty much garbage, so it was somewhat impressive because he wasn't on a full snap count because this was his first game back from injury. We've been through all this before. Yes, there's no Herbert, but he still does have value, and he is most definitely the only guy that you can get off the waiver wire that's still projected double-digit points. Only rostered in 39% of leagues. Just go take a claim on him if you got an extra spot on your roster. But if you don't know who to make room for on your roster or who to drop, who to add, whatever, start sits, anything, make sure to comment it in this video while you are watching. I get to 100% of them. I love helping you guys out, but we can also go through and get Justice Hill. This is a guy that really hasn't been relevant for about the entire season at this point, but we have Keaton Mitchell going down with an injury. MRIs confirmed that his ACL is torn. He's not going to be in for the rest of the season. It was gruesome. If you saw the video, you'd know he's not playing for the rest of the season. And if we know anything about this Ravens backfield, we know there's going to be a committee. They love to split it. It's going to be between Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, just how it was in the beginning of the season. And what we learned from that is that Justice Hill is going to get a lot of the third down roles, receiving role, all that good PPR stuff, and Gus Edwards is going to get those middle yards, churn out the big ones, get a majority of the red zone work. Even if we did see Justice Hill take a couple red zone carries over the past few weeks, you guys know I really don't like committee running backs, but he is still a viable RB2 if you really do need it, or maybe you just want the RB depth in case something were to pop up, some kind of injury of one of your guys. But another wide receiver that I am really excited about, kind of the same as the Josh Palmer situation, is Noah Brown. And if you're going to take anything from this video, please make him the one you're picking up. We need to be putting some respect on this guy's name. In a matchup without CJ Stroud, where they were projected to barely score, lose this game, not have a great game offensively whatsoever, he comes out and has 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown, leads the team in targets. They actually come out and win this game and are somewhat effective, and this pretty much cements him as a viable guy for the rest of the season because we have no Tank Dell, obviously out for the season. Nico Collins was missing this game with an injury as well. There is no clear-cut answer if he's coming back for week 16, and there was no CJ Stroud, and he was still able to be viable. Best case scenario, we'll get CJ Stroud back this week, and Nico Collins will miss another week. That is actually a very possible outcome. Stroud was only dealing with a concussion, so it is a really good chance that he does come back, and Nico Collins was ruled out very early into the week, so if we get a scenario where he is the wide receiver 1 with CJ Stroud, lock him into your starting lineups right now. But even if we do have all of these guys, he's still the wide receiver 2. Robert Woods proved to really not be that viable, only 3 receptions as the wide receiver 2 with none of these other guys. He led this team in every single receiving stat, yards, targets. I mean, it's pretty much apparent that he is this wide receiver 1. Nico Collins comes back, who cares? This team is very pass heavy, number 1 in pass attempts, top 10 in touchdown efficiency through the air. He's only rostered in 45, almost 50% of leagues. Go make sure he's not on there. But let's rapid fire this. Another guy we can go through and add is Tyler Boyd, another person that's benefiting from injuries. In the beginning of the season, he was a cool ad. Then Joe Burrow came back, he was a great ad. Then Joe Burrow got injured, he was a bad ad. Now Jake Browning is kind of good, and Jamar Chase is day-to-day with an injury. He's a good ad again. This really doesn't happen very often, but if Jamar Chase were to miss this week, he is definitely a viable guy we can go ahead and trust. And I'm not going to go too in-depth on this one because it is pretty black and white. If Jamar Chase is playing, he's not going to be viable. If he's not playing in week 16, he's a guy that we can consider starting, and that will be in the start sit video coming later this week. If you don't want to miss that, make sure to be subscribed. It takes half a second, but there are enough targets in this offense to go around for everyone to be viable. We saw Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both do it this week. They get a matchup against the Steelers, which isn't an insanely tough one. So if you're worried about Jamar Chase or you just want that wide receiver depth, go ahead and stash him while other people are getting big fantasy point players that aren't actually that valuable. Keeping it on the wide receivers, another guy that we can pick up that I assume people have been going in and out of through week to week to get them a couple viable points is Curtis Samuel. He's only rostered in 40% of leagues, most likely in yours. But take this from a Commanders fan. This game last week against the Rams was an absolute confusion. We had Sam Howell look pretty bad, and then in the last quarter of the game, Jacoby Brissett came in and almost led this team back to a comeback win. But with all that being said, Sam Howell is slated to start this week. And they do come into a matchup this week against the Jets, which is very, very tough. They allow the least points to quarterbacks, wide receivers, and we really could see a scenario where Sam Howell does get benched again later down the line of this game. So I'm not starting Sam Howell. Spoiler alert, alert, he's gonna be in the start sit video as a sit later in the week. But he's proven to be a viable wide receiver too. Really, despite the matchup, it doesn't change that much for him because he's such a dynamic dual threat guy. They can use him in the short game, a little screen pass, whatever it is. Am I gonna recommend you to start Curtis Samuel over some other more proven guys this week against the Jets defense? No, but he also gets a really good matchup against the 49ers the week after that, which might not seem like a good matchup, but they really are a pass funnel, and we're gonna have the revenge game of Chase against the Commanders. It's gonna be a spot where they're gonna have to pass a lot. Curtis Samuel is a guy that you can go ahead and stash if you need him, and who knows, maybe Jacoby Brissett comes back into this game and absolutely dominates and he gets some more uses than he already got. 9 targets last week is pretty decent. He's been doing that about all season. But a guy you can go through and pick up that does have some upside that was in the do not add video last week is Parker Washington, and a lot of things have changed in 1 week, which is making him a decent add. He might not be the traditional guy you can go pick up off waivers, but we have Christian Kirk out for the season, and now we have Zay Jones dealing with another hamstring injury, the injury that's been keeping him in and out all season. By the way, if you don't have Zay Jones, he needs to be your #1 add. He's a viable guy, especially if he ends up playing. If he doesn't, Parker Washington can be a good guy for you. He gets a great matchup coming into week 16 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who allow the second most points to opposing wide receivers. They are a complete pass funnel. Their run defense is pretty good. Their pass defense, nothing like it. So just secure yourself a wide receiver 2 with upside, because we know Calvin Ridley has been boom bust, especially with Christian Kirk being out. We expected him to be more safe. He still can't put it together. That puts Parker Washington essentially as the wide receiver 1 with opportunity, because we were seeing Zay Jones getting the wide receiver 1 targets over Calvin Ridley. That's a bit of an overstatement, but the targets are going to have to go somewhere. Trevor Lawrence is a capable quarterback with a good amount of passing volume, and the worst that happens is that Zay Jones does come back and play, and then you can pick up Zay Jones. If he doesn't play, you can go ahead and pick up Parker Washington. It's a win-win situation. But you guys know we got to go through the motion. A tight end that I really do like this week as a fill-in guy if you need it, I know a lot of people are still dealing with tight end problems, is Tucker Kraft. Ever since we had Luke Musgrave go out for the season in week 11, he has really been filling in well and staying under the radar. He's averaging just shy of 6 targets over his last 3 games, and he is playing 100% of the tight end snaps. Usually what we'll see when we get a starting tight end that's pretty decent go down is we'll get a split of tight end snaps. A couple guys will get 60, 40, 50% of the snaps, and they'll all split blocking and receiving work. But that's not the case here. He's absolutely dominating the time on field. No other tight end on this team can touch him in snaps or even routes run out of the tight end position. It is not close. And now we have Jaden Reed dealing with a toe injury from last week on top of Christian Watson's already looming injury. He seems to be injured every single week, so there is a real opportunity and possibility that we get a matchup with no AJ Dillon, Christian Kirk with no Jaden Reed, and he's essentially going to be the wide receiver 1 or 2 next to Romeo Doubs. Love has continued to have great passing volume. He's been top 15 this year, top 7 over the past month, averaging about 40 attempts a game. That is great for the receiving core because more passing attempts equals more opportunities, equals more fantasy points, and just more everything. You love to see it in an offense. Now, there is a scenario where Reed and Christian Watson do come back this week. Either way, he's a guy that we can pick up and has had volume and opportunities over the past few weeks. And moving into the quarterbacks of the week, I know there's still a good amount of people that are dealing with problems at this position. Maybe they're injured, or maybe you have a fine quarterback option, but you want to go ahead and take an opportunity to play some defense. Maybe the opponent that you're playing next week, this week coming up in the fantasy playoffs, doesn't have a sound quarterback situation. You can go ahead and pick up some of these guys to gatekeep the quarterbacks and help you win the week. The #1 quarterback this week is going to be Baker Mayfield. He's rostered in 50% of leagues, but if he's out there, please go ahead and pick him up regardless of your situation. He just finished as the QB2 last week in fantasy football and had a perfect passer rating, the only quarterback in history to do that at Lambeau Field. That has to mean something, and he did it off only 28 pass attempts, 4 touchdowns, almost 400 yards. And that was against a Green Bay defense that is pretty solid on their own. They're not any pushover defense by any means, but now they get a matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars coming into this week, and they are top 10 in points allowed to quarterbacks this year. And they have been slipping up as of recent. I mean, if you look at their past few games, they allowed 23 points to the Ravens, 31 to the Browns, 34 to the Bengals, 21 to the Texans. It hasn't been a great stretch for them. In a world where good fantasy quarterbacks are pretty tough to come by at this point in the year, go ahead and pick one up. Maybe somebody else in the playoff picture doesn't have a safe quarterback situation. Go ahead and get the last guys available, so you're going to make it harder on them. It's always good to play some defense if you've got an extra spot. But of course, you can go ahead and get Jake Browning as well if you do need him. He is a viable option. His passing volume is there. Again, like we were talking about before, he's definitely a step down from Baker. I would take Baker Mayfield first. But now they get a matchup against these Steelers who haven't really been that good, especially as of late. 30 points to the Colts, 21 to the Patriots, 24 to the Cardinals over their last 3. Not very hot for them. And Jake Browning didn't do too good in their first matchup when they played a couple weeks ago. It was his first game actually starting, having a full week of preparation. I'm not really taking that away from him. He's going to be a little bit risky if he doesn't have Jamar Chase playing, but again, if you need a quarterback, he's definitely the second best guy out there. But you guys know me, I absolutely love talking defenses in these fantasy football videos. This is my favorite thing to research for you guys, and I do not understand how are the Chicago Bears still available in pretty much every single league? They're only rostered in 10%. They've been doing absolutely amazing. Double digits. They haven't gone under 15 points in their last 3. They lead the NFL in total takeaways since week 11. They're a top 5 defense this month. They have been on absolute fire. A lot of this has to do with the thanks to Montez Sweat coming to the team. Either way, they are a well-oiled machine that you need to have to win you a fantasy week, honestly, because defenses can do that. On top of them being a super solid unit on their own, now they get a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, who are one of the worst offenses in the NFL. They are bottom 5 in pretty much every single offensive metric. It's a safe play. It's a high upside play. I've got them projected for just about 9 fantasy points. Go ahead and get them. They're pretty much free off the waiver wire. But another defense, if you can't get them, is the Packers, and I really don't see anybody talking about this. Again, we have to target, and we have been targeting teams that play the Panthers and play the Jets, because those two are the worst offenses in the NFL, and that defense of just grabbing the defenses that play against those two offenses has graded out as one of the best defenses in the NFL. We're going to continue that. The Packers play the Panthers this week. They just got to win over the Falcons by only putting up 9 points. Bryce Young is terrible. This offensive line is terrible. Who do we blame on their losses? I don't know. I don't care. All I know is that they don't put up yardage or points. Sacks equals fantasy points for us. And there's always the opportunity for Bryce Young to throw an interception, fumble, make a mistake. Again, I have them projected for about 9 fantasy points. You can plug and play them this week. Another defense is the Detroit Lions, surprisingly only rostered in about 30% of leagues. They do get a matchup against the Vikings. They have quarterback troubles. Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, both of them aren't that good, even if we do have Justin Jefferson coming in and helping this offense out. The Lions defense is pretty good on their own, but they have been a little bit risky, boom, bust here and there. And the last one here, if you do need to dig a little bit deeper, is the Denver Broncos. They didn't have a great week last week, but we knew that. We had them in the video last week about the waiver ads, because these next 2 weeks are the money weeks. They put up -2 points last week against the Detroit Lions, so everyone's going to be dropping them or just not wanting them. They're going to be available in all of your leagues, and the reason we were stashing them last week is because they get a matchup against the Patriots this week and the Chargers next week. These are two teams that are consistently projected for some of the lowest point totals every week. Zappy, he is not good. It's pretty much a lock to confirm that he's going to make some kind of interception, fumble, mistake every single week. The Chargers just got absolutely blown out. They fired some coaching staff. They have no Justin Herbert. This Broncos defense is pretty good on their own as well. Despite last week's matchup, they allow the 5th least points to opposing wide receivers. That's going to finish off this video. I seriously appreciate you guys watching all the way through. If you did, drop me a comment. Let me know how this season went for you, and if you've enjoyed these videos or any suggestions to make for the future, because fantasy football is coming to an end. I seriously do appreciate you guys rocking with me for the entirety of the season. I'll see you guys in the next one.